The conference room was full. The harsh white lights made every corner feel exposed, like there was no place to hide. I sat at the long glass table, my hands gripping a pen so tightly that the plastic creaked. Across from me, faces I'd known for years stared with thinly veiled satisfaction, some smirking, some pretending to look concerned. But their eyes gave it away. I knew what was coming. Sarah, my boss, Mr. Whitman, said coldly, his deep voice echoing through the tense silence. We've decided to let you go. The words sliced through the air like a blade. My breath caught. Let me go, I repeated, my voice trembling. After everything I've done for this company, after all the hours I've poured into, he cut me off. It's not personal, just business. But it was personal. I could see it in their eyes. Jessica, my so-called best friend at work, bit back a laugh. Mark leaned over to whisper something to Alex, and the two of them snickered like schoolchildren mocking a classmate. My humiliation was entertainment for them. My chest burned. My stomach churned. I'd given them everything. Stayed late when no one else would. Saved deals that others nearly destroyed. Sacrificed weekends, birthdays, even relationships. All for this company. And now, after years of loyalty, they were tossing me aside like I was nothing. Security will escort you out, Whitman added flatly. The room erupted with whispers. A few pretended to look shocked, but most were enjoying the spectacle. My eyes swept across the room one last time, memorizing every face, every smirk, every gleam of schadenfreude. Jessica's lips curled into a victorious smile. Guess it wasn't enough, she whispered just loud enough for me to hear. I swallowed hard, refusing to let the tears fall in front of them. They wanted to see me break. They wanted to laugh louder. So I stood. My legs trembled, but I forced my chin high. Fine, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Fire me, but don't you dare forget, this company still runs on the foundation I built. You'll remember me sooner than you think. Some chuckled. Some rolled their eyes. One or two looked uneasy, as if my words carried a weight they didn't understand. As security walked me out, the sound of laughter trailed behind me, haunting every step. They thought it was the end of me, but they were wrong. This was just the beginning. Cliffhanger. What none of them knew was that I wasn't leaving empty-handed. And soon the same people who laughed at me would be begging me for mercy. The apartment felt colder than usual that night. I sat on my couch, staring at the cardboard box of personal belongings security had shoved into my hands. An old mug, some pens, a framed photo from the company retreat where I thought I belonged. I pressed my fists against my eyes, the humiliation replaying over and over. Their laughter, Jessica's smirk, Mr. Whitman's cold voice. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. Something sharper, stronger, revenge. I opened my laptop. My mind raced as my fingers flew across the keyboard. Years of experience, late nights, and endless problem-solving had given me more than just exhaustion. It had given me knowledge. The kind that couldn't be erased with a termination letter. I knew their weaknesses, their financial holes, their shady backroom deals, the skeletons they kept buried because they trusted me to guard them. And now, I was free. As I scrolled through old emails, confidential files I had copied just in case, and notes I'd kept from years of board meetings, a slow smile crept across my face. Jessica thought stealing credit for my work made her powerful. Whitman thought cutting me loose meant I was harmless. They were about to learn otherwise. That night I drafted a plan. Not just to survive, not just to get even, but to take everything. The next morning, I met with an old contact, Mr. Lee, a quiet but sharp investor I'd once impressed during a deal. We sat in a cafe, sunlight streaming through the window. "They fired you?" he asked, disbelief in his eyes. "They laughed," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm not here to cry about it. I'm here to build something better, something bigger." His eyebrows arched. "And you want me in?" I slid a folder across the table. Inside were projections, loopholes in my old company's contracts, and opportunities they were too blind to see. His eyes widened as he read. "You're serious," he murmured. "Dead serious." For the first time in weeks, I felt power rushing back into my veins. "They kicked me out," I said, a quiet fire burning in my voice. "But mark my words, Mr. Lee, I'll be back, and when I return I won't be an employee." I leaned forward, my smile sharp. "I'll be their boss." Cliffhanger. Jessica, Whitman, and the rest thought I'd vanished. But my first move was already in motion, one that would shake their company to its core. They laughed. I smiled. Then I built. The morning after I met Mr. Lee, I woke up with the kind of focus that felt almost holy. Revenge, I decided, couldn't be sloppy. It had to be surgical. If I wanted to walk back into that glass building someday and sit behind the same mahogany table, I would do it on my terms, legally, ruthlessly, and with a power they couldn't deny. First step, credibility. I needed an entity the market would trust, not a spite-driven startup with a clever slogan. So we incorporated quietly, a consultancy and tech integrator that solved the exact problem my old company refused to fix. Messy client migrations, legacy systems, and complacent account management. Mr. Lee introduced me to two quiet partners who preferred the background. Hana, a former compliance head who remembered every failed audit, and Ravi, an operations whiz who could make a 6-person team run like a corporation. They signed because they believed in one thing I'd already learned. Industry players listen to someone who knows where the bodies are buried. We launched under a name intentionally unflashy, Meridian Solutions. The pitch was simple and true. We rescue companies that are drowning in their own bureaucracy. People liked honesty when packaged with competence. Next, the clients. Whitman's firm, Whitman & Comer, had 3 big accounts I directly managed. I didn't need to trick them. I needed to remind them who fixed their worst nights. I called one of my old contacts, a procurement director named Elaine at a logistics firm. She'd been burned twice by Whitman's slow migrations. I didn't start by selling. I started by listening. I let her talk herself into how tired she was of covering for her vendors. Then I said the thing she needed to hear. "Bring me the files. Give me 1 week. If I don't cut your costs by 20% and give you full audit traceability, I'll pay your penalties myself." It was bold. It was risky. It also worked. Word spread like a fever from client to client. Meridian delivered. We moved servers. We cleaned ledgers. We found hidden fees in supplier contracts and renegotiated them. We stabilized migrations other vendors had abandoned. Testimonials came, then referrals. What Whitman couldn't measure in his boardroom full of smirks was this. Trust takes longer to build than to break, but once rebuilt, it holds. Meanwhile, Mr. Lee and I began buying small blocks of stock in Whitman & Co. Quiet, unreported, through legal channels, and with investor partners who liked the arbitrage. It wasn't a hostile takeover yet. It was a slow accumulation that would one day let us stroll into a shareholder meeting and ask the right questions at the right time. At night, I worked in the glow of my laptop until my eyes blurred. I archived 1,000 little things from my old tenure. Contract clauses that guaranteed suppliers evergreen fees. Exceptions Whitman had signed that made audits meaningless. Vendor relationships tied to personal favors. I cataloged them and built narratives around them. Not melodramatic exposés for tabloids, but concise, documented briefings for investors and compliance officers who could move markets. I also did something else they never expected. I hired people from my old team. Not the obvious players. I courted the quiet, the disillusioned, the ones who'd watched promotions pass them by while Jessica strutted into credit. They needed refuge and were hungry for dignity. They got good pay, respect, and a place that celebrated their skills. They also brought insider knowledge, not of how to sabotage, but of inefficiencies and broken contracts. Suddenly, Meridian could deliver not just a better service, but a better version of everything the old firm pretended to be. And then the first public crack appeared. A mid-sized client, a partner Whitman had neglected for months, announced a vendor switch to Meridian. The media picked up a small piece. Local firm switches to boutique specialist after failed migration. Whitman's PR team dithered. In the hallways, people started to whisper. On a Tuesday, a board member called me asking for a call, curious, irritated, and suddenly worried. Whitman called me too. He tried to be casual. "So, Sarah, I hear you're doing well." His tone was like a blade wrapped in velvet. He suggested lunch. He invited me to play coy. I declined. I wanted him to wonder who I would be when I returned to his world. The stakes rose quickly. A second client left. A supplier banged on Whitman's procurement team for renegotiation. Share price slipped a hair. The smug smiles in the conference room lost inches of comfort. At home, midnight was my favorite hour. I would sit with another cup of tea and imagine the exact day I'd take my final step. The shareholder vote that would bring Whitman to his knees. That was the plan. Build Meridian into indispensable utility, then use our investor block to force governance changes. I'd not just get my job back, I'd make sure the people who laughed at me were the ones accountable for the mess. But power breeds paranoia, and somewhere, beyond my spreadsheets and legal briefs, someone else noticed our moves. An envelope arrived on my doormat one evening with no return address. Inside it was a single line, typed with clipped cruelty. "People like you don't get to rewrite history. Walk away." I folded the paper and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since the day they fired me. Fear. Not for me, for what had happened when threats stop at paper. I looked at the folder of contracts on my desk and realized the game had only just added another player. Cliffhanger. The next morning, an anonymous whistleblower filed a compliance complaint against Meridian, accusing us of soliciting Whitman's clients improperly. The complaint included an email copy supposedly from my account. Someone was trying to get ahead of me before I could finish my move. If you're going to fight a man like Whitman, you learn to expect counterpunches and to turn them into tools. The compliance complaint arrived in a tidy PDF that made me want to laugh and cry at once. It alleged Meridian had broken client non-solicitation clauses and suggested I had used my old account to harvest client lists. The evidence included a forged email, time-stamped, headed from sarahwhitmanco.com. My first reaction was cold logic. Whoever forged that had decent skills. My second was adrenaline. Someone was trying to tie me to an ethical breach that would ruin the investor narrative and scare clients back to his side. I called Hannah and Ravi in within the hour. We ran through the timeline. We verified server logs. We checked my old login history. I had not accessed Whitman's system since the day of my firing. The IT trail told the truth. The email's origin was from a proxy, cleverly masked. It reeked of someone who understood both legal exposure and how to push a board into panic. Public perception matters, but the board and investors care about risk. So we answered with the thing they respected: documentation. We prepared a legal brief showing Meridian's clean processes, our employee contracts, proof of new client relationships, and, crucially, a technical forensic analysis proving the email was forged externally. Mr. Lee used his contacts to get a respected independent IT forensic firm to issue a public readiness letter. I wanted the narrative to shift from, Is she a worm in the system? To who benefits from this smear? Whitman didn't stay idle. That week, the old firm's PR machine spun up a narrative of their own. Cautionary statements about rogue consultants, warnings about fragile vendor transitions. Their CFO made a public comment about competitors taking advantage of vulnerable clients. A clear dog whistle, thinly veiled, aimed at scaring procurement teams into inertia. There was even a rumor seeded that Meridian had poached an entire client team using illegal incentives. That night, I found Mark on my doorstep. He didn't knock. He didn't frame it as an innocent visit. He stood under my porch light with a suitcase-sized attitude and a smile that used to be charming but had gone brittle. He looked nervous. "Sarah," he said, voice a low scrape. "We don't want trouble. Whitman wants you to stop this. Walk away and we can make things amicable." I let him say his thing. It was familiar. The same "we can avoid scandal" line Whitman used when they wanted to buy silence. But now I had leverage. Meridian had momentum. My team had loyalty. Whitman had dwindling clients and a sputtering stock. I knew how quickly a board turns when investors smell risk. "I appreciate the offer," I said, the words calm as glass. "But I didn't build Meridian to negotiate with the people who burned me. I built it to fix what you broke. If you want amicable, stop breaking things." Mark's eyes flicked to the road, calculating. He leaned in, lower now. "They're going to escalate. They can make it personal, Sarah. This won't be just boardrooms. There will be audits, subpoenas, personal legal exposure." He paused, searching for an effect. "Think about what this will do to your reputation. Your investors will run. Your clients will leave." He left before I could answer. As the porch light clicked off, I realized two things at once. Mark was right. Escalation would be ugly. And the escalation was coming from inside their camp. Someone wanted Meridian neutralized early, and they were willing to drag mud where it would stick. So I did what I always do when threatened. I built a firewall. First, we went public with our own forensic report. A concise, professional debunking posted to Meridian's site and shared with our clients. Transparency is a sword against smear. Second, we invited an independent mediator to audit our client intake to show zero impropriety. Third, I picked up the phone and called the top 3 clients Whitman might panic into renewing. I spoke plainly. You're vulnerable if you stay with a supplier who hides problems. If you need someone who will tell the truth and fix it, call me. 30 minutes later, 2 of them had scheduled emergency consultations. The momentum swung. Not fully, but it tilted. Whitman's PR was drowned by our calm, documented response, and a couple of very angry clients who had actually been betrayed for months. The board noticed the contracts Meridian was saving. Investors murmured. The market responded. But winning one frontline skirmish doesn't end a war. 2 days later, the headline I most feared appeared in my inbox. Former employee accuses Meridian of data theft. And it was not on a neutral industry blog. It was on an outlet that had long been friendly to Whitman. A columnist who had phoned Whitman for exclusive quotes days before. I stared at the screen. The article quoted an anonymous insider, a phrase Whitman's camp had mastered. It described legal letters already sent, claims of Meridian using stolen proprietary algorithms, and a threat of immediate injunction to freeze our assets. The smear had a new, louder voice. On my dining table, the stack of contracts and technical docs felt suddenly fragile. Someone had access to the right channels. Someone was orchestrating a press machine. And the smell of desperation, Whitman's desperation, had a particular harshness. I picked up the typed threat that had arrived weeks before and compared the syntax to the article's anonymous quotes. The language matched a pattern I knew well. People who talk like legal men when they're trying to scare. The type of voice that believes its own mythology. My phone buzzed. It was Mr. Lee. "Don't panic," he said. but even his voice carried a hard edge of urgency. "This is a full-court press. They're trying to stop you before you become a problem. We need to act fast. Leverage the investors. Bring in counsel. And if necessary, meet with regulatory bodies before they can spin the narrative." He paused. "Sarah, they will throw mud until it sticks. Be ready. Cliffhanger." That night, as the city hummed, my office phone rang. An unlisted number. The voice on the other end said just 2 words, cold as steel. "Withdraw. Now." I hung up, heart racing. Someone inside Whitman & Co. was willing to play dirty, and if I didn't counter them properly, they could make everything I'd built vanish overnight. When the anonymous call ended, silence roared louder than the city outside my window. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a declaration. They wanted me gone, erased, before I could touch the throne they guarded so viciously. The next morning, I was in my office at 6 a.m. Hannah already had coffee waiting, her face taut with focus. Ravi had an entire whiteboard filled with possible scenarios. Injunctions, subpoenas, regulatory complaints. "Sarah," Hannah said quietly, "this is going to get messy. They'll drag us into court, and even if we win, the smear will hurt us." I nodded. "That's what they're counting on. Fear. We don't get scared. We document, we counter, and we make it impossible for them to bury the truth." By noon, the official legal notice arrived. Whitman & Cummer vs. Meridian Solutions. Claims of data theft, contract breaches, solicitation, defamation. A legal grenade with 100 pins pulled. I read every word. I almost laughed. The brilliance of Whitman's attack was not in its truth. It was in its chaos. The goal wasn't to prove me guilty. It was to keep me too busy fighting to keep building. But what he didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this from day one. Hannah handed me a folder. "We've been compiling our own counter-evidence. Every client that left Whitman did so because of poor service. We've got signed exit statements, records of failed deliverables, emails from their own project managers admitting fault." "And the so-called proprietary algorithm?" I asked. Ravi smirked. "Please. It's a glorified spreadsheet. We built something better months ago. I've got timestamps and Git commits to prove it." I exhaled slowly. This wasn't just defense. This was offense. Still, the personal attacks continued. That evening, a gossip blog published a nasty rumor. Ex-employee turns corporate mercenary. The comments section was vicious, dripping with bile about my looks, my age, my supposed desperation. I sat at my kitchen counter, scrolling, and for a brief second, the laughter from that boardroom replayed in my head, the humiliation, the smirks. It would have been easy to crumble. But then I remembered Elaine, my first client, her relieved voice when we solved her nightmare migration. I remembered the young analyst I'd hired, tears in her eyes as she told me, "Thank you for believing in me when they wouldn't." I wasn't just fighting for revenge. I was fighting for everyone they'd trampled. The next day, I made my move. We filed a countersuit. Not just a defense, an accusation. Breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent reporting to investors, violation of procurement laws. All backed by evidence from Whitman's own contracts and whistleblowers, who'd come forward once they saw Meridian standing tall. The press ate it up. Headlines flipped. David vs. Goliath, former employee fights back with receipts. The market noticed, too. Whitman's stock slipped another 3%. Investors started calling board members, whispering about governance failures. But I knew Whitman wasn't done. He never stopped at paperwork. He'd come for me personally next. Cliffhanger. That night, as I left the office, I saw a car parked across the street. Same one as the night before. Engine running, windows tinted. watching, waiting. The car followed me for 3 nights. Not close enough to chase. Just there, lingering like a shadow I couldn't shake. On the 4th night, I decided to confront it. I pulled into a crowded cafe parking lot, left my engine running, and walked straight toward the car. My heart hammered, but my face was calm. The window rolled down, and there he was. "Mark." "Sarah," he said, almost pleading this time. "Why are you doing this?" "You'll destroy everything." I folded my arms. "Everything? Or just the empire you helped build on lies?" His eyes darted, restless. "You don't understand. Whitman isn't going to stop. He'll ruin you. He'll ruin Meridian. I cut him off." "Then maybe he should start worrying about what happens when his board sees what I've got." Mark's mask slipped for just a second. Fear. Real, raw fear. And I realized something. Mark wasn't here out of loyalty. He was here because he knew the walls were closing in. I leaned closer. "Tell me, Mark, how many skeletons are you hiding for him? How long before he throws you under the bus?" He flinched. That was my answer. The next morning, Hannah walked into my office with a grin that could split stone. "You're going to want to see this." She slid a flash drive across my desk. Mark sent it anonymously. Internal memos, emails, audit reports. It's all here. Proof of falsified revenue, hidden client losses, off-book payments to keep contracts alive. I stared at the drive, my hands trembling. This wasn't just ammunition. This was the nuclear option. Why would he give this to us? Ravi asked. I knew why. Mark had finally realized the truth. Whitman couldn't protect him anymore. And when rats abandon a sinking ship, they always look for the lifeboat. The power balance had shifted. I wasn't just defending Meridian anymore. I was holding the keys to Whitman's downfall, but with great weapons come great risks. If I used this wrong, it would look like blackmail. If I used it right, it would end Whitman for good. That evening, I drafted a plan. Present the evidence directly to Whitman's board. Bypass Whitman himself. Show them the rot. Offer them a choice. Clean house voluntarily, or face a shareholder revolt led by me and Mr. Lee's investor bloc. The final move was clear now. Cliffhanger. As I sealed the envelope with Mark's files, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you've won. Tomorrow the whole world will know your darkest secret. I froze. My secret? The one thing I thought I'd buried forever. And if they had it, everything could collapse. The text rattled me more than I wanted to admit. My darkest secret. For years I had buried it. The mistake that had almost ended my career before it began. Only a handful of people knew about it, and even fewer had the proof. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt like a threat. Every shadow like an accusation waiting to step into the light. By morning, the proof was public. A headline screamed across a business blog. Rising star or repeat offender. Sarah Khan's early career scandal resurfaces. There it was. My shame dragged from the grave. 10 years ago, as a junior analyst, I had been accused of manipulating project results. The truth? My manager at the time had forced me to take the blame for his blunders. I'd been suspended, nearly blacklisted, but eventually I cleared my name. Still, in black and white, without context, it looked damning. And Whitman's PR machine spun it like gold. Suddenly, the whispers started. Clients called in panic. One even asked, Sarah, is this what we signed up for? Another Whitman in disguise? I felt the ground tilting under me. That afternoon, Whitman himself held a press conference. His smug smile lit up every screen. It saddens me to see a former colleague fall into old habits. We wish her well, but the industry must protect itself from those who repeat history. The vultures laughed again. I could almost hear the echo of that boardroom from years ago. But this time, I wasn't the same Sarah. I gathered my team that evening. The office was tense, buzzing with dread. Hannah looked at me like she was waiting for me to break. Instead, I stood straighter. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. 10 years ago, I was accused of something I didn't do, and for years I let the silence eat me alive. But let me be clear. I will not let my enemies use my past to erase the truth of who I am now. I walked them through the documents we had from Mark, the mountain of fraud Whitman had buried. We're not backing down, not now. Because if we win this fight, it's not just me who gets justice. It's everyone they've silenced, everyone they've crushed. The room shifted. Eyes lit up. Spine straightened. For the first time since the smear, I felt strength surging again, but Whitman wasn't finished. That night, I received a second message. "Meet me tomorrow, noon, riverfront. Come alone. Or your past won't just haunt you. It'll bury you." I knew who it was. Whitman himself, and I knew. This was the trap I had to walk into. Cliffhanger. As I stood at the riverfront the next day, wind biting against my coat, a black car pulled up. The door opened, and Whitman stepped out, smiling, like the devil himself had come to collect. "Sarah," Whitman said smoothly, walking toward me, his hands in his pockets like we were old friends. "You've caused me quite a headache." I said nothing. My eyes stayed locked on him, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a tremor. He chuckled. "Do you know what I admire about you? Tenacity. You remind me of myself, once upon a time. But here's the difference. I win, always." He slid an envelope across the bench between us. Inside, every skeleton you've ever tried to bury. Not just your little scandal. Personal details, family matters, things you wouldn't want the world to know. I didn't touch it. He leaned closer, his breath hot against the cold air. "Walk away, Sarah. Shut down Meridian. Disappear quietly, and I'll let you keep your dignity, fight me, and I'll destroy you in ways lawsuits never could." For a moment, my chest tightened. The envelope sat there like a loaded gun, but then I laughed, a soft, bitter laugh that made his smug expression falter. "Whitman," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "You've spent your whole life hiding skeletons. Me, I've already lived through mine. You can expose them, twist them, scream them from rooftops. But do you know what will happen?" He raised an eyebrow. "I'll own it. I'll tell the world myself, because my truth doesn't scare me anymore. Yours should." For the first time, Whitman's smile cracked, just slightly. But I saw it, the flicker of doubt. I stood, leaving the envelope untouched. "See you in court." I walked away before he could respond. My legs were shaking, my throat dry, but inside something had shifted. He could no longer control me with ghosts. That night, I drafted my public statement. No spin, no excuses, just the raw truth about my past, how I had been scapegoated, how I rebuilt myself from the ashes. By morning, it went viral. The response shocked me. Instead of scorn, people rallied. "We Stand with Sarah" trended. Industry voices praised my transparency. Clients who had wavered came back stronger. Whitman's weapon had backfired. His smear campaign turned into my badge of resilience, and now I was free to strike with everything I had. Cliffhanger. As I prepared to present Mark's damning files to Whitman's board, Hannah rushed into my office, pale and breathless. "Sarah, it's worse than we thought. Whitman knows. He's planning something huge for tomorrow's shareholders' meeting. If he pulls it off, we're finished." The morning of the shareholders' meeting, the air felt heavy, almost electric, the kind of silence before a storm. I stood in front of the mirror, straightening my blazer, staring into my own eyes. You've come too far to lose now. But Hannah's words echoed in my head. He's planning something huge. When I arrived at Whitman Global's headquarters, the lobby was swarming with press, shareholders, lawyers, and nervous assistants darting like bees. Cameras flashed as I entered. For the first time, no one looked at me with pity. They looked at me with expectation. Inside the grand boardroom, Whitman stood at the center like a king guarding his throne. His smile was razor-sharp. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth as silk. "Before we begin, I must address a matter of integrity. Our competitor, Sarah Khan, has been attempting to undermine this company with stolen information and baseless accusations. But today, I will prove that her crusade is nothing more than a desperate grab for relevance." He snapped his fingers, and the screens lit up. My heart stopped. Emails, documents, but not just mine, Mark's too. Altered, twisted, rearranged to look like I had colluded with him for years to sabotage Whitman Global. Gasps rippled through the room. Whitman's voice cut through the chaos. "She claims to expose corruption, but in truth, she's the very snake she pretends to fight." He looked straight at me, his eyes gleaming with triumph. For a moment, the ground felt like it was slipping away. My throat burned. Around me, whispers hissed like poison. "She's finished. She's a fraud." But then Hannah's hand gripped mine under the table. "Sarah," she whispered fiercely, "trust the truth. We have the real files. It's now or never." I rose, my voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. "You want to talk about snakes, Whitman? Then let's talk about who's been poisoning this company for years." I connected my laptop to the projector. The screens flickered, and my heart pounded as I opened Mark's untouched files. The originals. Pages and pages of hidden accounts, illegal payouts, offshore laundering. "This," I said, pointing to the damning evidence, "is the truth. This is the empire you've built on lies, intimidation, and theft. And these," I gestured to Whitman's fake files, "are nothing but desperate fabrications." The room erupted. Shareholders leaned forward, shouting questions. The press outside caught the commotion instantly, their lenses zooming in through the glass walls, but Whitman didn't flinch. His smirk deepened. "You think you've won?" he whispered, stepping close so only I could hear. "You don't understand. These people don't care about truth. They care about power. And I am power." Cliffhanger. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the room. A shareholder had fainted after seeing the numbers on the screen. Chaos spread like wildfire. And in the middle of it, Whitman grabbed the mic and shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, I demand a vote right now on whether Sarah Khan should be banned from ever setting foot in this boardroom again." The room spun into pandemonium. Voices clashed, phones buzzed, and security rushed in to restore order. Whitman's voice thundered above it all. "Vote now and we end this circus." But then a voice rose, strong and commanding. It wasn't mine. It was Mr. Hamilton, the company's oldest and most respected shareholder. A man who had sat silently all morning, observing. Enough. His cane struck the floor. The room froze. If there will be a vote, then it will be on the leadership of this company, not on silencing truth. Gasps filled the boardroom. Whitman's jaw clenched. Hamilton turned to me. "Ms. Khan, do you have proof of these allegations?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Yes, every word, every number. And unlike Whitman, I'm not afraid to let the world see it." I handed him a drive with Mark's original files. He scanned the documents, his face growing grimmer with each line. Then he looked up, his voice ringing with finality. "This is irrefutable. Whitman, you've bled this company dry for years, and you dare smear this woman to cover your crimes? Not anymore." He raised his hand. "All in favor of removing Victor Whitman as CEO?" Hands shot up. One by one, almost all of them. Whitman's face went pale. His lips trembled as he barked, "You can't do this! I built this empire!" Hamilton's voice cut him down like thunder. "No, Whitman, you stole this empire, and now it returns to those who will rebuild it with honesty." He turned to me. "Sarah Khan, would you take responsibility to lead?" For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. The girl who once cried in a bathroom stall after being fired, humiliated and broken, was now being handed the keys to the very empire that had mocked her. I stood tall, my voice steady. "Yes, but not as another Whitman, as myself. And with one promise, this company will no longer crush people for power. It will raise them." The vote passed. Victor Whitman was escorted out of his own boardroom, his screams echoing in the hallway. The press swarmed him like vultures, his downfall plastered across every screen. And me, I stepped up to the podium. The cameras flashed. My reflection stared back from the glass wall. Not the broken woman from years ago, but the boss of everything they said I'd never have. "My name is Sarah Khan," I said into the mic. They laughed when I was fired. But today, I own it all. The applause shook the room, and for the first time in years I smiled, not just for surviving, but for winning.